this hour. We're going to go back and join Sid and Sybil now and get more about what's been happening there, because we know that the Indian Prime Minister arrived in Sydney yesterday for the third and the final leg of his three-nation tour. So tell us a bit more about what this event is all about and what they're hoping to achieve from this visit as well.
Well, welcome from Sydney to all our viewers, I would say, when it comes to this mega event. So the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to address diaspora, the Indian Australian diaspora here in Sydney. We know that the Indian Prime Minister has been making sure that when it comes to his foreign visit, he addresses and meets the diaspora. That's a permanent fixture of Indian Prime Minister's travel abroad, and this time there is no difference as well. Australia has a huge Indian diaspora. In fact, many of them who I have spoken to have said that they have two hearts, one heart for India and one heart for Australia. But today it is the celebration of the relationship, how this living bridge can form a bond between India and Australia. We know approximately 4 lakh Indian Australians are there, the Indian diaspora members in Australia, and essentially they have been playing an important role, making an important and positive contribution to the society, whether it's the IT sector, whether it is the politics as well. We spoke to Lisa Singh, who is an Indo-Fijian and Australian origin senator, who was a senator here. But essentially the point is that how the Indian Australians have been making an important role. There has been a strong connect. But if we talk beyond diaspora, we know as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Australian Prime Minister sit down for conversation tomorrow here in Sydney, focus will be on how there can be a larger connect. Free movement of people. India is keen that more Indian come to Australia. There is plan for a mobility pact to be signed between the two countries. Also, we know that when it comes to education, that has been a sector of convergence between the two countries. A lot of Indians come to Australia and of course study here. Now, under India's new education policy, there are plans to open foreign universities in India, and one of the first universities which will be opening, the foreign universities which will be opening in India, will be Australian universities. They will be opening campuses in India's Gujarat. And this Highland visit by the Indian Prime Minister reaffirms the strong linkages between the two countries. Remember that the Australian Prime Minister was in India earlier this year. Now the Indian Prime Minister is here in the country. Both countries are part of the Quad. Quad is seen as the central point of the Indo-Pacific vision of the entire of India and Australia, that calls for free and open Indo-Pacific. A strong message, many would say, to China. But if I can again come back to our point of conversation, what's happening in this very stadium, we can hear the chants of the people here, the Indian Australian people who are now eagerly waiting for the Prime Minister to come. In fact, I saw a number of top Indian officials just arriving here in the hall, including the Foreign Secretary. We also know that the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is going to join the Indian Prime Minister in this mega diaspora event as well. In the past as well, we know that host leaders have joined Indian Prime Minister in diaspora events. One, for example, was when it comes to the diaspora event in Copenhagen, where the Denmark's Prime Minister joined the diaspora celebration. So this kind of celebration is not just about the diaspora, it's about linking the Indian culture, linking the country with India, whether it's Denmark, whether it's India, whether it's Japan. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister is on a 3-country visit. This is his last leg of the 3-country visit, and he started with Japan, where WION was present, and we saw how the diaspora in Hiroshima had converged to welcome the Indian Prime Minister. Then, of course, similar scenes coming from Papua New Guinea, and now biggest of all is happening here in Sydney, where the diaspora is now waiting for the Indian Prime Minister's arrival. Approximately 20,000 people are present in this stadium, where right now I am standing, and I'm just surrounded by a sea of humanity, I would say, in terms of people who have converged to get a glimpse of the Indian Prime Minister. We have seen similar scenes in the past as well, but Sydney, I would say, is special in many senses. It's lucky as well in many senses to be the second city to witness such a grand diaspora celebration. Earlier when the Prime Minister came, he came to Australia in 2014. That was his few first foreign trips, and the Australian rolled out the red carpet, and we saw the similar case this time as well. In fact, I can point out, and something we all know, is that the Quad Summit was expected to happen here in Sydney, but the summit got cancelled because the US President Joe Biden couldn't come because of domestic commitments. Japanese also cancelled his visit to Japanese Prime Minister, but the Indian Prime Minister said that he will be going to Sydney, meet the Australian Prime Minister, and of course spend 2 days here. In fact, today in Sydney, we saw he's starting his day with meeting the Australian CEOs. He also met the Australian influencers, and now the diaspora is the next big focus of the Indian Prime Minister. Also tomorrow the conversation will be on the political level. Both the leaders, the Indian Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Minister, will be holding talks on a range of topics, whether it's trade, whether it's the issue of security and defense cooperation, or whether it's the issue of how both countries can converge in the wider Indo-Pacific region. That conversation is something that is also going to be a top priority for the leadership of two countries. We also expect a joint statement that will be released after that important meeting that happens in Sydney. But we can also, if talk about a wider Indo-Pacific view, is that when it comes to India-Australia relationship, we have seen similar like-minded countries also coming together with India, Japan, Australia, to make sure that when it comes to aggressive actions by countries like China, a strong message can be sent to them.
All right, Sybil, thank you so much indeed. We will be heading back to you throughout the day here on WION, so thank you for that, discussing the fact that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is indeed in Sydney for his third and final leg of his tour of the country, and just talking about the fact that the two countries have such close ties in regards to IT, politics, education, a very close relationship. Thank you.